Hello, everybody. I'm Teresa Palavoda, and today we're going to talk about Harriet Jacobs and incidents in the life of a slave girl as it relates to the cult of domesticity or the cult of true womanhood. So Harriet Jacobs is born around 1813. She is enslaved as a child, but she writes that she didn't even realize that she was a slave until she was about 6. Her mother and her father died. She was raised, she lived with her, or raised with her grandmother. Her grandmother was famous for her cookies or biscuits, and she sold biscuits on the side in an effort to save money so that she could purchase her freedom. Harriet Jacobs is 11 years old, and the woman who owned her died, and she was purchased, she was willed to a man whose name was Dr. James Norcom, and he became the bane of Harriet Jacobs' life. So Harriet Jacobs was living in an enslaved life. It was not a happy life, but Dr. James Norcom made her life even more awful. And the way he did that was by constantly pursuing her, and in a sexual manner. And she resisted him in numerous ways. Excuse me. In the book, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, Harriet Jacobs refers to herself as Linda Brent. So all the names are changed. And so she refers to herself as Linda Brent. She's the protagonist in the book. Dr. Norcom is known as Dr. Flint in the book. One of the ways that Harriet Jacobs gets away from Dr. Norcom, Dr. Flint in the book, is that she decides to have a relationship of her own choosing with a man in the area, a white man, whose name is Mr. Sawyer. He's a lawyer, and you can remember it like that. Sawyer is a lawyer. And he's known in the book as Mr. Samuels. He actually later becomes a congressman, but Harriet becomes, she thinks that if she starts a relationship with him, that Dr. Norcom will become uninterested in her and will sell her and any children that she has by Mr. Sawyer. Dr. Norcom did not do that. Instead, it just enraged him that she made that choice, and he continued to pursue her. Her book is broken down into lots of different chapters, and I would suggest that you read at least one chapter so that you can understand what her life was like, but also understand the language that she uses. When you're reading the book, you'll see that a lot of the language is very flowery. I'm sorry that my camera keeps going in and out of focus, but you'll notice that she keeps going, she uses a lot of flowery language, and she never says, that he raped her, or that it was an attempted rape, that kind of stuff. She's not graphic at all. Part of the reason that she's like that is because of the cult of true womanhood. If women are supposed to remain pure in body and soul, that means not only is Harriet Jacobs not supposed to know about these types of issues, which is ironic since she's being chased literally and figuratively around by this man, but she's also not supposed to talk to other women about it. And so if all the women, so what is her purpose behind writing this book? It's to let women in the North, specifically women, know about what's going on and trying to get them to help stop this issue. And so part of that issue is that, so So she can't be too graphic, because if she's too graphic and those women read it, then they become impure. So they would resist reading anything that would make their thoughts impure. So she's trying to let the women of the North know what's going on without actually going into too much detail, because it's not, quote, appropriate for women to know about these types of things that are going on. So Harriet Jacobs at first was going to have someone else write her autobiography, or biography it would be if somebody else wrote it, but then she realized that no, she wanted just to put everything in her own words. She didn't want to allow someone else to use her stories and then to embellish and that kind of stuff. She wanted to tell her story. And so this is a story of struggle. It's a story of survival. She is ultimately gets her freedom and is able to, someone actually, so let me tell you what happens. Basically, she decides that she can no longer resist Dr. Norcom, and so what she decides to do is that she's going to run away. But she doesn't want to leave her children. So she just runs to her grandmother's attic. And she lives in her grandmother's attic for 7 years. And it's not a huge attic, it's like a crawl space. And she lives there for 7 years before leaving and going to the North. Of course, by this time the fugitive slave law is enacted, and so she still had to continue to hide while she lived in the North. And so basically what ultimately happened was a friend of hers in the North purchased her and then set her free. So that's basically what happens. So I want, with regard to whether or not Harriet Jacobs would be considered a true woman, she was very pious. In a lot of the chapters of the book, you'll see that she refers to God and asks God to help her and that kind of stuff. So she is pious. Is she pure? Well, she tries to remain pure of heart and soul, but she does take the initiative to have a sexual relationship with a man. She had 2 children with him in an effort to establish her own life. So today we would think she was a very brave woman. At the time, she was embarrassed and didn't want to tell her grandmother even what she had to do in order to protect herself. Was she submissive? Well, she rebelled against her against her slave owner, which again, society pushed the idea that that slaves would reach the ultimate goal of heaven if they did everything they were supposed to do here on earth, and that meant obeying their slave masters. So she realized that that was not right, and so she rebelled against that. And remember, like I said in the other video, these are social ideas that are passed down in an effort to control various people. So this cult of true womanhood, this cult of domesticity, is something that, even though parts of it still hang on today, we need to toss those off and allow people to be, the best of who they are. So if you have any questions, let me know. That's sort of my synopsis with regard to Harriet Jacobs and the cult of true womanhood. Thanks a lot. Have a great weekend.